What's up, motivators? Taren here. Thank you for tuning in to today's video and podcast. Today, we are going to go over everything you need to know about gear if you are thinking about getting into road cycling or triathlon biking. We are going to go over everything you need to know for selecting the right bike, getting comfortable in the saddle, what group set do you use, what bike computer or heart rate monitor do you use to track your fitness, how do you make sure you have the right wheel set and tires, what kind of helmet do you get, and what type of shoes do you get. We're going to go over everything from the standpoint of a new athlete that is getting into the sport without unlimited funds. What are the things that you need to get into the sport to actually enjoy it and perform well without breaking the bank? Because it's really easy to just walk into a bike shop and say, hey, here's $20,000 and my kid's college tuition, let's have at it. But that's not practical, and that's what most magazines and videos and coaches will lead you to believe. They'll talk about how you can buy speed and how you need to have deep section wheels and how you need to have the highest end group set with all the electronic shifting. We're going to talk about, yes, what might you aspire to get, but really what is the minimum viable bike for you to get on and start riding fast and have a lot of fun. Let's get into it. My name is Taren Gazelle. In my late 20s, I was overweight, unfulfilled, and couldn't even run to the end of the block. Over the following 10 years, I lost 65 pounds racing triathlons, running races, cycling events, and world championships. But eventually, the suffer culture of endurance sports training caught up to me, causing health issues and injuries. Now, my company Motive and I are on a mission to help people live more fulfilling lives by reaching endurance sports goals using healthy methods. We can all kill it on race day without killing our bodies. Let's do it. So thank you for tuning in. If you are listening to this in a podcast format and you want any of the visuals, you don't need to watch this. You can go to the Taren's Motive Method YouTube channel and watch everything that we're going to go through. So you'll see some of the examples of some of the gear that we are going to demonstrate. If you are watching this and you'd rather just listen, you're probably not going to miss a whole lot, but you can go over to the Taren's Motive Method podcast everywhere that podcasts are found, and you can listen there. Let's start out with the first and funnest thing, that is buying the bike. Personally, I am a big believer in buying a road bike as your very first bike. The reason for that is a road bike is much more versatile than a triathlon bike. So even if you are thinking about doing a triathlon as your first race, I would still recommend getting a road bike and then putting on some clip-on aero bars as your first bike. And I'll explain the reason for that. The main difference between a road bike and a tri-bike is that a tri-bike is meant to have your entire upper body a lot more further forward. So that means that the saddle is much more further forward and over top of the pedals, whereas with a road bike, it's sitting back a fair bit. And the handlebars is a lot more twitchy. The handling of a triathlon bike, it twitches, it moves, it's not meant to be really nimble. So a little bit of a movement in the handlebars creates a big movement down in the wheel. So it's not nearly as safe to ride in a pack. It's also not very comfortable. You can get really nice and comfortable in a triathlon bike and grow into being comfortable in that aero position. It's made for getting into that tight aero position and holding that position for 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 hours. It's all about that one single race day ride. Whereas a road bike is meant for riding every single day, more casually. And thus, the position is a little more upright in the front, so you're not bent down and you're not over top of the handlebars as twitchy as you are on a tri-bike. And then because the saddle's a little bit further back, it's a lot more like sitting in a chair. So in my case, how I would use a tri-bike is I had top of the line, like $12,000, $15,000 tri-bike, and I would really only break it out about 3-4 months before a triathlon race. I would start getting comfortable in it by spending more and more time in that aero position, starting with about 3 minutes at a time, building up to 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 5 hours at a time in that aero position. The rest of the year, when I was outside of training for a specific triathlon, I would be on the road bike. And even during the time that I was training for a triathlon, I would be on the road bike most of the rides throughout the week. So the easy ride of the week, even the long ride of the week, the interval ride of the week, all done on a road bike. It was really just the race pace interval ride that I would go and do on the tri bike. So once a week, maybe twice a week at most is when I would be on a tri bike. The rest of the time, road bike. In addition to that, a tri bike is going to be much harder to sell than a road bike. So let's say you get into road cycling and triathlon riding and you decide that you don't want to do triathlon anymore, you're going to have a much harder time actually reselling that triathlon bike. Whereas a road bike, because there's so many more people doing it, you're going to have an easier time reselling that. That makes a very big difference in your long run cost. If you even stay in triathlon, I almost guarantee that your first triathlon bike is not going to be your last triathlon bike. You are going to want to always upgrade. So even in the case of you get into triathlon and buy a triathlon bike, you're probably going to want to upgrade from that first bike, leaving you in the situation where you're having a hard time reselling it to move into that next bike. So what I would definitely do is start with that road bike, start getting an understanding of what type of riding you're going to do, whether it's group riding, whether it's strictly triathlon riding, whether you're strictly training for triathlon, or you're doing some road group interval riding and road races and grand fondos and ultra cycling events. And then you can move on to the next bike and it's fairly easy for you to resell that bike. So enough about that. Let's get into what you should actually be looking for in a road or triathlon bike. For your first bike, I would recommend under $5,000 and used over new. If you're sticking to those two parameters of under $5,000 and used instead of new, you're going to be getting a heck of a lot of bike. You're going to get a really, really nice bike that somebody else has paid the depreciation for. Look, I ride Canyon bikes. I love Canyon bikes. I like new bikes, and I definitely recommend that you support your local bike shop. But fact of the matter is that when you buy a bike brand new, you're going to incur a ton of depreciation on it. So I like that rule of thumb of under $5,000 and a used bike. That's going to ensure that when you go to resell that very first bike, you are going to be able to get, in some cases, almost close to what you paid. You're going to be able to flip that. I have one friend who, I don't think he's bought a really new bike in 20 some years. He just buys slightly used bikes, fixes them up, rides them for a while, flips them 9 months later over and over and over and over. And he's almost always got a top of the line bike that he just keeps spending $4,000 on over and over and over. And in some cases, he even makes money on some of these bikes. The next thing I want to talk about is, we will lift this up, the GROUPSET, the GROUPO. That is the shifters, the brakes, all of the parts that make the bike go. That is the GROUPSET or the GROUPO. Related to that first point of wanting to buy a bike for under $5,000 and wanting to buy a used bike so that you don't incur a lot of depreciation, choosing the right GROUPSET is a big factor in that. Typically, most entry-level bikes, they are going to come with a Shimano 105 GROUPSET. This is the bottom of the barrel. This is the entry level. I've actually qualified for a world championship on Shimano 105 GROUPSET, so it's perfectly acceptable for you to do, but it's not what most people are going to be looking for. And most of the bikes that are being sold out there that are used are going to have Shimano 105 GROUPSET. So it's going to drive down the price. You're going to incur more depreciation. There are two main GROUPSET companies, being Shimano and SRAM. I've ridden both. I've got a really good relationship with Shimano, but I also like SRAM. So I've ridden everything from Shimano 105 to Shimano Dura-Ace, the very top of the line. I've ridden SRAM Axis Red E-Tap Wireless. I have on my gravel bike SRAM Force. So I know a lot about this. In order of lowest and entry level GROUPSET to highest price, the most entry level is Shimano 105 and SRAM Rival. If you're choosing a bike, I would stay away from these for the depreciation factor. The next level up is Shimano Ultegra or SRAM Force. This is your real sweet spot. This is where you get a really, really good GROUPSET that is nice and light, that shifts really quickly, that is very reliable, nice and responsive, easy to work on, but not super expensive. The top of the line is Shimano Dura Ace or SRAM Red. This is where you get into the lightest group set. This is where you get into the fastest shifting, but the gains are very, very marginal. For as much as $1,000 to $2,000 more, you're not getting a whole lot more than the Ultegra and the Force group set level. So looking at the group set that you want to choose for your triathlon bike or your road bike, look at Shimano Ultegra or SRAM Force. And if you can get a bike that is still in that under $5,000 range for Dura Ace group set or SRAM Red, you are going to be getting a hell of a good deal. I should probably say that Campagnolo is another group set that is very common. This is like saying that you own a Ferrari. Is it nice? Yes. Is it very, very premium? Yes. Is it practical? No, certainly not. I know some people who have had a Campagnolo group set and one tiny thing breaks and their bike is down for months because the availability of parts and people who can work on a Campagnolo group set is much, much smaller than Shimano, which would be the most common, and then SRAM, which is the next most common. The final thing that I should mention with group sets is wireless. There are two instances where I would recommend that you get a wireless group set. One is if money is no option. That $5,000 budget is absolutely meaningless to you. You want to go and spend whatever you need to do. You want to make a stupid money decision, but a smart bike decision. You can go and get the wireless group set. Wireless is what I have on this tri bike. Wireless is what I have on my gravel bike. Wireless is what I had on my last road bike and my last tri bike. The reason that I really liked wireless is because I was traveling a lot. When you get a wired Dura Ace group set and a lot of wires going through the bike, the more you travel, the more all of those wires start rubbing and all of your tolerances and your adjustments start going out of whack with your bike. So it's not super healthy for your bike to be traveling a lot and having all of those things come loose and change all of their settings. In the case of wireless, because everything's wired, there's nothing pulling, and I found it much easier to travel with a bike, and it was just much more foolproof. So in the case of wanting to make a silly money decision but a fun bike decision, or if you travel a lot, that's when you should consider wireless. Otherwise, mechanical Ultegra or mechanical Force is going to be your absolute best bet for what you're looking for. I want to take a minute to thank our first sponsor, being UCAN. Now, UCAN is a better way to start your day. I've typically talked about it from a performance improvement benefit because UCAN is a carbohydrate that doesn't spike your blood glucose and then cause a crash later. But I actually use it, as you can tell by there only being one bar in this box and an empty package of granola, that I like to use this as the way to start my day because it's not that terrible bowl of cereal that spikes your blood glucose, causing a crash later in the day. It's also not the bulletproof coffee that, yeah, it gives you some calories, but it really doesn't get you any energy to start your day or get to your workout. UCAN bars and granola are something that I have just about every single morning because it's an excellent way to get something in your stomach while keeping your blood sugar nice and stable. So maybe you've tried UCAN as a performance tool in the past, but UCAN as actual food to start your day with as a replacement for energy bars or oatmeal or cereal or granola, and having that nice stable blood glucose with a good amount of energy is an excellent way to do this. If you want to get a discount on UCAN, you can go to ucan.co/Taren, where we've got a guide for how I like to use UCAN in training. But if you buy anything at that website through ucan.co/Taren, you will get a discount applied at checkout. Let's put the bike aside for a second and talk about the next piece of gear that is really critical, and it is the best bang for your buck as far as dollars that you spend for speed improvements that you get. Piece of gear that you can possibly choose to purchase, that is a helmet. Absolutely upgrade from the $40 Walmart helmet and into a proper helmet, and I'm going to tell you why. In my right hand, I have an Aero Tri helmet. This has a long tail in behind it, has a visor integrated into the front. It has a small amount of holes and a spout in the top for you to put water onto your head and cool off. In my left hand, I have a more traditional road helmet. This has really big vents in it so that your head stays cool. It is much lower profile. There isn't a big tail coming off the back. And the difference between these two helmets is that the Aero Triathlon helmet is going to be faster, but it's not nearly as comfortable. Your head gets a lot hotter. It's also not super cool to show up to a group ride wearing an Aero Tri helmet. You're gonna get made fun of behind your back. On the other hand, a typical road helmet is a lot more comfortable. It's much cooler. You can fit a toque or an ear warmer or something like that, a headband, a sweatband underneath this really easily. It adjusts a lot more easily. This is built more for being on that road bike with your buddies and just enjoying yourself, being a lot more comfortable. Now, why would you choose one over the other? Well, I'm going to say that you don't have to. Drop these two and then bring up the third option. This is the Laser Bullet. All of these are laser helmets. This is a Shimano company that I work with, and I've worn their helmets for about 4 years. The Laser Bullet helmet is an Aero road helmet. So if you show up to a group ride with this Aero road helmet, you are going to not be made fun of, because it's very common for people to upgrade from a more common road helmet, that is in my left hand here, to a more Aero road helmet. The difference between the two is that the Aero road helmet is slightly less ventilated than the more common road helmet. It has a tiny little tail coming off the back, whereas the road helmet really has no tail, but it offers a really big aero advantage. I've actually done testing where I held the same amount of watts with a standard road helmet, with an aero road helmet, and with a very aerodynamic triathlon time trial helmet. And the time trial helmet and the aero road helmet were basically identical. But the time trial helmet and the aero road helmet were significantly faster than the road helmet. So in order of fastest to least fast, we would have time trial helmet as 1A, aero road helmet as 1B, and there are even some wind tunnel tests where people are actually faster on an aero road helmet than they are with a time trial helmet. Because with a time trial helmet, you really can't look around. You can't look down, you can't look to the side very easily, because that tail creates a fair amount of aerodynamic drag when you move around, and the aero road helmet doesn't have that problem. In a distant two behind those as far as speed, the road bike helmet. So I would actually recommend that if you're getting just one helmet that you want to use for time trialing in road races, you want to use it for triathlon, that you can use in a triathlon, you can use it in a hot weather triathlon, your head isn't going to get too hot. You want to use it for a group ride and fit in and not look like a doof, the Aero Road helmet is the best all-around helmet for you. The reason I say that this upgrade, going from the $40 entry-level helmet to a $200 or $300 Aero Road helmet, is the best bang for your buck as far as dollar per time improvement that you can get, is because I've done testing, and these helmets, being $200 to $300, offer almost as much of a speed improvement as a set of $2,000 deep section wheels, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. This being $200 to $300, whereas those wheels cost $2,000 to $3,000 depending on which wheel set you're getting, this is a much better bang for your buck as far as dollar per speed improvement that you can make. This is really something that you're going to have to get anyway. You have to get yourself a helmet. So as opposed to going for the $40 helmet or even the $200 road helmet, get the $200 or the $300 Aero Road helmet, and you're going to make huge speed improvements of, in my experience, somewhere around a half to a full kilometer per hour by upgrading to just this one helmet. The next thing that we are going to talk about is shoes. In my left hand, I have a set of Shimano road cycling shoes, the Spire in very spicy red. In my right hand, I have a set of Shimano triathlon shoes. There used to be a time where the difference in shoes between road shoes and triathlon shoes was enormous. Triathlon shoes are meant to very, very easily slip in and out of and be worn barefoot. They have more vents. If you look at the very top of this shoe. You can see that there are vents so that as your feet get sweaty, it's going to come through. There are also holes for vents on the front and on the bottom. It's all meant to wick a lot of the sweat and moisture away from the shoe. Triathlon shoes also tend to have a nice big opening, so you can hop onto your bike, slide your foot into your tri shoes, reach down very easily, put that Velcro on and tighten it up, and there's a little loop here in the back to get the shoe on as you're on the bike. So that is really nice and practical for a triathlon, but the fact of the matter is that what we're seeing from a lot of professional triathletes, and these are people whose lives depend on being as fast as possible, some of them are actually wearing road shoes on the tri bike. Why would that be? Fact of the matter is that road shoes have become better ventilated over the last few years. They're a lot more comfortable in the last few years. It's easier to get in and out of them with systems like what we've got on this set of shoes here, the BOA system, where you just have to turn a dial and it tightens itself up. I believe Patrick Lange, the two-time Ironman world champion, I'm fairly certain that he used just the 2 or 3 year older version of this shoe that's in my hand, the road shoe that's in my hand. What I would recommend, again, unless you are a super dedicated triathlete, get yourself a pair of road shoes because they're going to be more versatile going back and forth between road and triathlon. The same way that I didn't recommend that you get a tri bike until you know for certain that you are dedicated to triathlon and you can afford that additional bike, that's the way that you should look at triathlon bike shoes. Stick with the road bike shoes, and in some cases, just looking at this here, seeing that there's a very defined ridge on the front of the Velcro in both areas that you Velcro your foot into the triathlon shoe, that is not nearly as aerodynamic as the more smooth road shoe. I've never actually seen somebody do testing on one versus the other, but I know some of the things that cause poor aerodynamics, and well, this tri shoe would have some of those characteristics. But really when it comes down to it, the decision between road shoes and tri shoes is more just a cultural thing. If you're in the road community, you definitely want road shoes. If you're in the tri community, you definitely want tri shoes. It's sort of just a thing about fitting in where the performance between one or the other isn't nearly as big as something like the helmet or the wheels that I am about to tell you about. Before we talk about wheels, I do want to have just one quick moment on the shoes is definitely get yourself a set of good insoles. These are the Solstar carbon insoles. These are very, very firm, very structured. There's only one place that you put power into the bike and propel yourself forward. That is in the pedals. You need to make sure that your power transfer from your body into the pedals isn't leaking energy, that as much energy as possible is going into that shoe and is going into the pedal to propel yourself forward. In my experience, insoles have resulted in a much more stable position, but I've never seen any increases in power transfer. These carbon fiber Solstar insoles, on the other hand, I've actually seen my sprint power go up by about 50 to 90 watts. Like the peak power output, instead of being 800 or 820 without these insoles, put these insoles in and I've cracked 900. And I've done this test 2 or 3 times. I was shocked to actually see the results, but time after time after time, as I went back and forth, sprinting in one and then sprinting in the other, these carbon fiber insoles were a big improvement. Now these Solstar insoles aren't cheap. Even the cheapest ones I think are 80 or 90 bucks. Can get cheaper insoles at a local bike shop that make your foot a little bit more stable, but like I said, those are more for comfort than they are for performance. If you can't afford the 80, 90, $100, I would get yourself a pair of Solstar carbon fiber or their lower priced, I think they're plastic mixed with carbon fiber. Like there's a more entry level model. And I've tested both, and both of them had that same better peak power output. Now let's talk about wheels and tires. Wheels are talked about a lot in triathlon and road cycling, but tires are a very unsung hero. Not a lot of people obsess about tires in the same way that I do. We're gonna talk about wheels first, and then we'll move into tires. In order of fastest to least fast with wheels, the fastest rear wheel is going to be a disc wheel. That is where the whole wheel is completely solid. There's no spokes, it's like a solid paint. The next fastest is going to be a 80mm deep section wheel. This is what, even if people are doing a disc wheel on the rear, they might do this 80mm deep section wheel on the front. The next fastest is a moderately deep section wheel, which is about 40 to 60mm deep. And then the slowest would be a regular set of training wheels where it's not really deep at all. It's kind of just meant to get you out on the road. I'm going to give you some guidelines for what to choose based on the type of rider that you are. A disc wheel is really only good if you are a heavy athlete, being over 150 pounds, if you average over 35 kilometers per hour in a race, and if your race doesn't have too many turns. The reason for this is that the speed improvement at 35 kilometers an hour is noticeable. The disc itself, it does catch the wind a lot, so you have to be heavy enough to keep it on the road. And when you're taking turns, the disc wheel takes a lot of effort to get up to speed. So if you are light, if you aren't going very fast, if you are doing a lot of turns, the disc wheel, while in a wind tunnel in just a head-on, straight sort of plane, it is going to be the fastest. Fact of the matter is that most people are out riding in the real world where there are turns, where there's wind. So practically speaking, the disc wheel doesn't work for nearly as many people. Also, that's only really in triathlon. You don't want to show up to a group ride with a disc wheel. What most people will use in triathlon is a deep section wheel, being 80mm deep. This is a much better balance of aerodynamics and practicality. Even in the Ironman World Championships in Kona, they banned disc wheels because they're so impractical and the crosswinds are so dangerous. So most people are going to be looking at an 80mm deep section wheel. If you're a road cyclist, this is very, very uncommon. You're going to show up to a road group with an 80mm deep wheel, and you might get looked at a little bit funny. And the reason for those funny looks is because those 80mm deep section wheels, again, because they are a little bit thicker, they're a little bit more weight, takes more effort to start the actual momentum of the wheel. As a wheel is turning around, the poundage of that rotational mass, I believe, is 4 times what the actual mass is. So if you're looking at that deep section wheel and it's an extra 1/4 of a pound, it's more like the performance of an extra full pound on your bike. And when people spend $10,000 to shave off a 1/2 pound on their bike, this makes a big difference. So you almost only want to look at those deep section wheels if you're in a triathlon. The much more common and versatile approach is the 40 to 60mm deep wheel section. This is going to be something that I have ridden. This is also what a lot of even triathletes, even though they're looking for the most aerodynamic possible setup that they can get, they will put a 40mm deep or a 60mm deep wheel on their front wheel because that wheel gets knocked around a lot more than the back wheel in the wind because you don't have as much weight on it. So what Cam Wurf, who has put out some of the fastest bike times in all of triathlon over the last 5 years, he's a professional cyclist, I believe he went with an 80mm deep wheel on the rear, and then I think it was as low as a 40mm deep wheel on the front at the Ironman World Championship because that provided the best balance of aerodynamics and handleability, stability in those crosswinds. And then if we look at just a training wheel that has no depth to it whatsoever, maybe it's not carbon fiber, maybe it's made of aluminum, well, that is not going to be very aerodynamic. It's not going to be very fast. It's going to be a very, very slow wheel. It might be soft and comfortable, but it's not going to give you that pep and that excitement to get out into your bike. What a lot of people do is they have a set of training wheels that they do all of their riding on basically throughout the year, and then they only pull out the race wheels on race day. Personally, I don't find this very fun. I like to go out and know that every time I'm out there, I am able to smash it, I'm able to go fast, and there's really not a lot of downside to having those nice wheels out there with you all the time. If you're riding in an area that has a ton of potholes, Well, A, you should be considering whether you should be out there as it is, but I have been riding in places that have tons of potholes for years, and I've ridden my carbon race wheels the entire time and I've never seen a bad thing happen to my bike. So I would actually say get those 40 to 60 millimeter deep wheels. It's going to allow you to ride really well in all of your training, in all of your group rides. If there are any sprints in the group rides, you're gonna have a little bit of pep in your pedal stroke, and then you're going to be able to go to your race and still perform really fast. Next, let's obsess a little bit over tires. Tires have been something that I have completely geeked out about over the last few years. Historically, what a lot of people did was they got the most narrow, slick tire that they could pump up to 120 or 130 PSI and it would go ping. It would be pumped up so tight. Well, what we found is that is actually not a very fun bike to ride on because it's so stiff. There's no give in the tire pressure whatsoever. It's also not very fast. We've found that how everyone has been looking at tires for 20 or 30 years has been incorrect, and we've found this over the last 5 years. Also, the tire compound, the type of material that is used to put together that tire makes as much as a 12 to 15 watt difference in the amount of effort that you have to put out. Considering that most people when they're going out for a casual ride might be around 150 watts, or if you're going at a really solid pace that you can hold for a long time might be 250 watts or so. When we're talking about having to put out as much as 10% more watts for the same sort of speed, that is a really huge area that you can save a ton of energy and go a lot faster. So what I would look at as a couple of things is tubeless for one. By changing to a tubeless tire, you can run your tire at a lower tire pressure and still go at the same speed. That's going to make it much more comfortable for you to ride. You're going to be less beat up, which when you're out riding with your pals on a road bike, you don't want to end those road rides feeling beat up. And if you're in a tri, you want to be able to get off of that tri bike and get into the run, not feeling like you've been in a war zone. Tubeless is something that I thought was maybe a little bit of a gimmick, but I have tubelessized all of my bikes. The next thing you want to look at is the tire compound. This is something that you are going to have a little bit of a trade-off for puncture resistance and durability, the length of the tire, and speed. What I like to do is direct people to a website, bicyclerollingresistance.com. They, on this site, they test all kinds of different tires. There's upwards of 100 road tires and 100 mountain bike tires and 100 gravel bike tires. You can sort their test by most puncture resistant, most durable, or fastest. What I like to do is actually sort by the fastest and then go down about, well, we'll call it like 7 or 8 results. This, in my opinion, gets me a tire that I feel really fun about riding. I have a lot of enjoyment from riding fast bikes. I like fast wheels, I like fast tires. All those tires that appear as the fastest tires, in a lot of cases, those are actually tires that are only race day tires that you will race on one time and then you throw them away. Yeah, seriously, like you're buying $150 or $200 sets of tires that you only get for one race. I've done this before in world championships or races where I wanted to qualify for world championships. These are race cotton tires, but for most people, they don't really need to be worrying about this. Where I like to go down in those lists is like the 7th to 10th fastest tire that's out there. And this gives you a much better rolling resistance to durability kind of payoff. This becomes a tire that you can ride for 2, maybe 3 seasons, get a ton of miles out of it, and go super fast while you're doing it. As far as width goes, look at the recommended tire width for whatever wheels you've got. Every single wheel has a tire width that it has been designed for. Typically, that is either 25 millimeters or 28 millimeters now. A perfect setup, if your bike allows this, is 25 millimeters wide on the front, 28 millimeters in the rear, assuming that that is the most aerodynamic for your bike and your bike has the clearances to be able to do that. The reason that you're looking at that is because the wheel out front and the tire out front is cutting through the wind, so it does need to be a little bit narrower to be aerodynamic. 25 is still nice and aerodynamic, but it's a lot nicer to ride than the old 23s or the 21s that used to be out. They're also quite a bit faster. Now, why you have the 28 on the back is because you can, again, run that at a slightly lower tire pressure. It's going to absorb the road chatter a little bit, and that's where you are going to feel the most beat up from the rear wheel, because that's what's going to be bouncing around, because that has the most weight on it. Our second sponsor for today is Athletic Greens, and this is AG1. AG1 is a product that I use literally every single day, and I started doing so because I wanted a replacement for a traditional multivitamin. Traditional multivitamins, if you've used them, you know that your pee turns lime green, and essentially you are flushing money down the drain. You're making very expensive pee because your body isn't able to absorb traditional multivitamins in its typical form. AG1 has 75 vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all from whole food ingredients, so that it's very easy for your body to absorb. It's in a greens powder, and I can tell you from experience, and I'll save you the nitty-gritty gory details of why I know this, but I know that my body is absorbing this. Basically, I know that I'm not making very expensive pee. So if you want to try this out, Athletic Greens has made it easy for you. You can get a free year's supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packages with your first purchase of AG1. You can do so by going to athleticgreens.com/Taren. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Taren to take ownership of your total health with this all-in-one nutritional insurance. I love it. I'm seriously a big fan. Second to last for the gear, let's talk about the electronics. These are all the devices that you are going to use to collect and store and interpret and display all of your riding data before, during, and after your ride. We're talking about a heart rate monitor strap, we're talking about a bike computer, we're talking about a power meter, we're talking about even your phone or a watch. Let's go through each of these one by one. A lot of people get very worked up about all of the gadgets that they could possibly get, particularly with a power meter. In order of the things that you absolutely must have, I'm going to say a heart rate monitor strap. This is a Garmin HRM Pro. This is really versatile because it connects via Bluetooth to all of your main bike computer devices, but then it also connects to things like phones and iPads for our pals over at Zwift. Even if you're a new endurance athlete, I would encourage you to get a heart rate monitor. The reason for that is that watch and wrist-based heart rate monitors aren't nearly as accurate. Like, they might be off by 40 or 50 beats per minute when you're running and riding around in a really violent state, like during intervals. Whereas a heart rate monitor that is done with a chest strap, I've always found to be very, very accurate. So I would go with that. If you don't like the feeling of that chafing, like a lot of women find that it chafes, or they can't get a heart rate monitor strap to sit quite right in their rib cage area, you can get a bicep-based heart rate monitor that I've found to be almost as accurate. It's not nearly as precise, but it's very, very accurate for all of our purposes to get you really nice heart rate monitor based training. This is a must to make sure that you are getting your zones and your effort levels right. A bike computer is totally optional. There is no secret sauce about a bike computer that says you have to have a bike computer. All you're looking to do with a bike computer, or some of the alternatives that I'll explain to you, is just display what your current metrics are. So you don't have to have a bike computer to do that. You can do it based off of a wrist-based watch, like a Garmin watch or a Wahoo watch or a Suunto or a Polar. All of these types of devices can sync up with your heart rate monitor strap or your power meter or your cadence monitor if that's what you've got. Heck, you could even use your phone, and I've seen a lot of people that have a lock that locks their phone into place, and they use that for a bike computer. The reason that you might want a bike computer and not those other options is because the mounts for bike computers are really well designed to integrate and just look really slick on the bike. The displays are also customizable so that you don't have to do a lot of monkeying around of finding an app and maybe not having the adjustability in how your display looks. If you're using your phone, you're not gonna have to turn your wrist to use your watch if you're looking at the display on your watch. With a bike computer, it's just mounted right on your handlebars, staring right at you. So being able to see what all of your metrics are is really good. But again, if you're just getting into it, I would probably recommend sticking with a wrist-based device, because you can also use that for running and swimming, which is a big thing for triathlon. So you're already going to have it. You don't have to spend another $400, $500, $700 on a bike computer. Where I would recommend getting a bike computer is if you are an individual that travels a lot, or you ride in places that you're not familiar with and you want to create maps where you do a little bit of exploring. Having a bike computer that has maps loaded and can tell you turn-by-turn directions of how to make sure that you don't get lost is really cool. I had myself just a very small bike computer for the longest time because I was in Winnipeg and 99% of my rides were the same rides over and over. But then when I started traveling a lot for work and bringing my bike, I wanted to go on different rides and do a fair bit of exploring, and I didn't want to have to look at my phone every single time I came to an intersection. So I got, at first, it was the Wahoo Roam, which was good for loading up maps. This is the Garmin 1080 Plus, which again is good for loading up maps. So I would recommend that if you are somebody who likes exploring, get either something like the Roam or the 1080 Plus, because it has a nice big screen that you can see turn-by-turn directions. The smaller screen bike computers don't necessarily have a big enough screen to be able to see that, and in a lot of cases, because they don't have that big screen, they don't even offer the maps feature. Last thing about devices is a power meter. Now this is going to be blasphemous to the true roadies out there who have been just absolutely brainwashed into thinking that you have to have power on your bike. I am going to actually tell you that for the first 6 to 7 years that I was in endurance sports, and 5 of those years I was either on the podium overall of local races or winning my age group, and I did so without a power meter. I like that new athletes should say, hey, you know what? A power meter for $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000 is just too much for me to spend, but do I need to have it? That's a good question to ask. I would encourage you to stick with the heart rate based training for the low intensity train, to set a heart rate cap that for most of your easy rides, you don't go over that heart rate cap. And this teaches your body to feel the sensations of training. You're going to feel what is an appropriate effort level. When somebody says, well, stay easy, you're going to know what easy is based on your heart rate. You're also going to be able to go and do intervals based off of perceived exertion. This is where I think it's really critical for athletes to develop the feeling of what is sustainable, what's too much. Because this allows you to get into a race, and if you've nailed the taper and you can actually push a little bit harder, well, you're going to have a better day than if you had just stayed tied to a metric. If you have traveled and maybe your body isn't agreeing with that travel and you need to back off on race day, well, you can feel the sensations of your body if you have taught yourself what race pace and what race effort and appropriate effort levels feel like, and you'll back off to make sure that you don't blow up. So even though you're having a bad day, you'll still have the best version of your bad day if you have stayed away from that power meter in the first few years, learning the sensations of what appropriate effort level is. After that, after you've developed those sensations, by all means, go and get that power meter, add it in. It's fun, it's very precise to be able to do intervals with an exact wattage, but it's not absolutely required. And this is where all of the road cyclists are going to unsubscribe, sorry. The final thing we are going to talk about is the saddle. This is very critical. It's very overlooked because most people just buy a bike and then they move the saddle into place to about the right height, and they don't even worry about moving it forward and backward or tilting it up and down, and they don't even think about saying, hey, maybe this saddle isn't right for me. Well, I'll tell you what a lot of road cyclists do, what a lot of triathletes do. They move from bike to bike and they will take the saddle with them. In a lot of cases, athletes will keep the exact same saddle for years and not move from one to the other. We should do the same, because making sure that we're comfortable in the bike position is almost as important as all the gears, all the tires, all the wheels, all the group sets. If you're not comfortable, you're not going to want to ride. If you're not riding a lot, you're not going to be very fast. If you aren't comfortable, you aren't going to be able to put in a lot of power to the pedals. So being comfortable, almost as important as everything else. I can do long videos about what to look for in a saddle, but when it really comes right down to it, as a triathlete, you want a split nose triathlon saddle because that allows you to roll forward into the aero position. It allows your pelvis to roll forward and then you're still sitting on your sit bones. As a road cyclist, you want a road cycling saddle because you're more upright, and road cycling saddles are designed for you to be more upright so that your sit bones are sitting on the saddle in that upright position. Now, I can go and tell you I like this saddle, I like that saddle. But saddles are like shoes, so any advice that I give you about one saddle over another isn't going to be relevant to you. Something that I like might feel like you're sitting on a sideways 2x4 to you. Something that you like might feel like it is just kicking me in the mummy daddy buttons over and over, and I'm not going to be able to even ride to the end of the block. What I would recommend is, in a perfect world, you have a relationship with an excellent local bike shop that has a ton of demo saddles and they have a saddle switcher. A saddle switcher is a bike fitting tool that can very easily and quickly just flip from one saddle to another, to another, to another, to another. What I would do is go to a local bike shop, try out a whole bunch of saddles, and then ideally, I don't know if many of them will allow you to do this, is try that saddle that feels the best in that fitting situation for 10 days to like 2 weeks. It's not until you get about 5 rides in before you really know if you like a saddle or not. Alternatively, I've done this with Cobb saddles, and they said that it was okay to say this, is to buy several saddles, and they do have a guarantee where any of the saddles that you don't like, you can send back. So they've actually done videos with me where they've sent out about 12 saddles, said I think these 3 saddles are going to be the ones that you'll like the most, Taren. And what actually happened in my case was, I think it was 1 or 2 of those saddles that I liked. The third one I hated, and it was one that they didn't even think that I would be able to stay on for any longer than about 30 seconds was the one that I ended up staying with and is my main saddle. So no matter how you do it, you have to try a whole bunch of saddles. The next thing that you need to do when it comes to saddle is a bit of a bonus thing, because it's not about what gear do you get, but it's about how do you use the gear. And I'll tell you that you want to play around a fair bit with your saddle. Go up in saddle height all the way to the point that fully extended your heel just barely touches the top of the pedal. From there to about 2 centimeters down, that is the up and down range that you have with your saddle. Then you go forward and back in 2 millimeter increments roughly. And when you find the position where it just goes, oh, that feels better, that's your position. There is no exact guideline of where it has to be forward and backward. And then as far as up and down goes, almost all saddles are designed so that the main meat of the saddle that you are going to be sitting on is horizontal. So with those guidelines of testing out a number of saddles about what feels right, and then finding the saddle position that is up and down, forward and backward, tilted up and down, you should be able to get yourself a saddle that you can sit in all damn day. So motivators, thank you for watching to the end of the video. If you found this helpful, odds are very good that you're probably looking for some type of an endurance sports training plan, be it triathlon training plans, run training plans, cycling training plans, swim run, or duathlon training plans. There is a link in the description below to our Motive training app that has training plans for all of those races that are as good as a one-on-one coach, but as cheap as doing it yourself. You can click that link in the description below, sign up for free for 14 days, try it out, see if you like it, and if you love it, you'll be able to stick around for less than the cost of putting all of this together and training yourself. You'll get complete guidance on what to do with all of your endurance workouts every single day. You'll get all the supporting strength workouts, all the yoga workouts, and nutritional guidance for every single workout. Hit the link in the description below if you found this helpful and you're watching. Hit the like button. If you are listening to this over a podcast and found this helpful, leave a review on iTunes and we would appreciate that. With all of that said, later motivators.